Tonight, you're not sleeping in a cosy medieval castle with a roaring fireplace and thick velvet blankets. You're a peasant, and winter doesn't care if you're tired. The sun drops early, the wind slips through every crack in your home, and the damp cold clings to your clothes like a second skin. There's no central heating, no warm bath waiting, and no soft bed to disappear into. Just a low fire that must be guarded like treasure, a straw mattress that itches, and the slow, quiet challenge of making it to morning. So dim the lights, get comfortable and step into the dark, because surviving a medieval cold night was a skill, not a guarantee. The first thing you notice isn't the cold, it's the way the day gives up. The sun doesn't set slowly like it does in summer. It doesn't linger, glowing gently on the horizon, letting you finish what you started. In winter, daylight feels borrowed. It slips away while you're still working, and suddenly everything in your world becomes urgent. You can feel it in the air. The moment warmth stops fighting back. You're out in the open, in fields that look tired and flattened, the soil dark and stiff like it's already half frozen. The ground is hard in places, crunching under your shoes, and every breath you take feels sharper than the last. It's not just cold air, it's air that dries your throat and makes your nose sting like the world is trying to remind you who's in charge. Your hands ache first. Not because you've done something dramatic, no heroic battle, no grand adventure. Just work. Endless, ordinary work. The kind that turns your fingers into stiff tools and makes your knuckles raw. You've been hauling, cutting, gathering, fixing, whatever needs doing before the darkness hits. And now, as the wind slides under your sleeves and around your collar, your skin feels tight, stretched thin by the temperature. You rub your palms together, hoping friction will do what the sun no longer can. But friction doesn't last. The cold is patient. Around you, the village is already changing shape. It's the same place you've always known, but winter makes it smaller. People disappear inside earlier, shadows stretch longer. Smoke rises from rooftops like quiet signals, thin and grey against the sky. The sound of the day fades too. Fewer voices. Fewer footsteps. Even the animals seem to lower their energy, as if the season itself has commanded silence. You look toward the horizon and see the colour draining out of everything. Grey clouds, dull fields, bare branches clawing at the air. The trees don't look asleep. They look stripped, and when the wind moves through them, it doesn't sound like leaves whispering. It sounds like bones knocking together. Your body understands the schedule before your mind does. Winter isn't a season of comfort. It's a season of timing. You can't afford to wander. You can't afford to get caught outside when the last light dies. Because once the darkness takes over, the cold changes again. It stops being something you tolerate and becomes something that hunts for the warmest part of you. Your chest, your belly, your breath, and it finds you. So you begin moving toward home, not with excitement, not with relief, with strategy. The path is uneven, packed with mud that has turned thick and stubborn. In places, it clings to your shoes like wet clay, heavy and cold, each step pulling at you as if the ground itself wants to keep you. The village lanes are narrow, and the smell of damp soil mixes with smoke, animal waste, and something faintly sour that never fully leaves the air in winter. It's not pleasant, but it's familiar, and familiar means safe, at least safer than the open fields. As you walk, you pass other peasants doing the same thing, heads down, shoulders hunched, arms wrapped tight around themselves. Nobody wastes warmth on long conversations. A quick nod is enough, the kind of nod that says, "Yes, I'm still here. You're still here too. That's good." One woman carries a bundle of sticks under her arm, held close like firewood as a newborn child. Another drags a sack that leaves a faint trail behind it, scraping the path. A boy runs past you, his breath puffing out in white bursts, cheeks red with cold and effort. He's fast, but he's not carefree. Not really. Winter doesn't let anyone be carefree. Not for long. Somewhere nearby, a dog barks once, sharp and sudden, then stops. The sound echoes strangely in the thinning air, as if the village is already half swallowed by night. You hear the distant lowing of a cow, long and impatient. The animal doesn't like winter either. It doesn't understand why the grass vanished and the world became harder. It only knows it's hungry, and you know you have to keep it alive, because this season isn't just about surviving yourself. It's about keeping everything alive that your survival depends on. You reach the edge of your home area, where the houses sit low beneath their thatched roofs. They don't look impressive. They don't look like the kind of place a story would begin. But winter stories begin here, in small places, in cramped rooms, in the space between fire and frost. You can see your house from a distance, but it doesn't glow warmly like you might hope. It doesn't welcome you with golden windows and candlelight. There's no glass, no bright lamps, just a dark shape crouched against the landscape, a roof heavy with straw, walls that seem to blend into the earth itself. If someone didn't know it was there, they could mistake it for part of the hillside. You step closer, and the wind hits you again, harder this time. Sliding around the building as if it's searching for an entrance, you pull your cloak tighter and feel the fabric press against your chest. Wool helps, but it can't perform miracles. Wool is a tool, not a guarantee. Your fingers fumble at the door latch. The wood feels cold and slightly damp, like it has absorbed the whole season. You push the door open, and for one small moment you expect relief. A rush of warmth. The comfort of being inside. But winter peasants don't get warm air. They get less cold air. The inside smells like smoke, old straw, and the faint lingering scent of boiled food. The darkness is immediate. Your eyes take a second to adjust, and in that second you feel how small the space really is. Low ceiling, rough walls, dirt floor. It's not the kind of room that holds warmth easily. It's a room that leaks it. A room that constantly negotiates with the outside world. You step in and close the door quickly behind you, because you've learned something without anyone needing to teach you. Every second the door is open, the cold follows, and it doesn't politely wait outside. It comes in like an uninvited guest. There's a fire in the hearth, but it isn't roaring. It's barely alive. Just a low glow, a soft breathing of embers under ash. If you ignore it, it will die. If it dies, everything becomes harder. Rebuilding fire isn't as simple as striking a match. It takes time, fuel, patience, sometimes luck. So you crouch down and feed it carefully. Not too much, not too fast. You place small pieces of wood the way someone might place coins on a table, one at a time, watching the flames catch, watching the orange light flicker back into existence. The fire responds slowly, like it's waking up. A thin lick of flame appears, then another. The room brightens just enough for you to see movement. A child shifting in the corner, a shape under a blanket. Someone you live with. Someone you share air with. Someone whose warmth will matter in a few hours. 'Cause tonight, you won't sleep alone. Not if you want to survive. You stand up, and your knees crack softly. Your back feels tight. The kind of tight that never fully disappears in a life built on hard labour. You roll your shoulders, but the motion doesn't loosen much. Cold doesn't just attack your skin. It reaches deeper. It creeps into joints. It turns your body into a stiff thing that resists itself. You take off your outer cloak and hang it where it won't get too close to the fire. Too close, and it might spark. Too far, and it stays damp. Everything is a balancing act. You glance upward and see the roof beams, darkened with soot, stained from years of smoke. You can't afford a perfect chimney system. Most peasants can't. So the smoke lingers. It curls up, thick at the top of the room, and you breathe the cleaner air lower down. You live closer to the ground for a reason. Even the warm air above feels hostile. Your breath slows. Your heartbeat settles. But the cold is still with you. Even inside, it hasn't surrendered. The room is merely a pause in the wind's attack. The air here is still sharp, still chilled, and the floor beneath your feet is ice-cold dirt. If you stand still too long, you'll feel it climbing through your soles. So you keep moving. You check whatever food remains. You glance at the pot. You see a crust along the inside where pottage once simmered. You know what tomorrow looks like already. You know what the next meal will probably be, and the next, and the next. Winter isn't a season of surprise, it's a season of repetition. And repetition is how you endure it. Outside, the sky deepens into a darker grey, then into true night. The little light you had vanishes completely. The world beyond your door becomes invisible, and that invisibility presses against the house like a weight. You can hear the wind more clearly now. It slides along the roof. It finds loose straw. It rattles and whispers and sighs. And you realise something that is both comforting and terrifying. The house is the only thing standing between you and that darkness. But the house is not strong, not truly. It's straw, mud, wood, and hope. A shelter built by tired hands, repaired with whatever could be spared, and trusted because there's no other choice. You step closer to the fire and stretch your hands toward it. The warmth touches your skin and disappears almost immediately, swallowed by the cold air. It's not the kind of heat that fills a room. It's the kind of heat you have to chase. You have to sit close enough to feel it, close enough that your face warms while your back stays cold. You turn one way, then the other, trying to warm each side of yourself like a piece of bread over coals. This is how winter begins, not with dramatic snowstorms or heroic struggles, but with a quiet shrinking of the world. Fewer hours of light, smaller circles of safety, shorter distances you're willing to walk, tiny habits that become survival laws. And as you settle into the dim glow of your hearth, you understand the truth you'll be living for the rest of the night. The cold isn't something you fight once, it's something you keep out, moment by moment. Because in medieval winter, darkness doesn't end the day, it begins the real challenge, and you haven't even tried to sleep yet. In stories, a house is a refuge, a place where the world stops chasing you. But in a medieval winter, your home doesn't seal you off from the cold, it only slows it down. It gives you a few precious degrees of mercy, and even that mercy is fragile because this house is not built like a fortress. It's built like a compromise. You stand a little closer to the hearth and let your eyes adjust to the dim light. The flames throw soft shadows across the room, making everything seem like it's shifting even when it isn't. The walls are close, the ceiling is low, and the whole place feels alive. Not in a comforting way, in a way that reminds you the wind can still touch it. The walls are made of wattle-and-daub, thin wooden strips woven together like a basket, then coated in a mixture of mud, straw, and whatever else was available. It looks solid from a distance, especially when it's dry, but winter has a way of proving what's truly strong and what's only pretending. Mud cracks, straw loosens, wood shrinks, and the cold finds every weakness like it was born for this job. You can feel it even now, in the corners of the room, where the air doesn't move much but never quite warms either. There are places inside your home that feel like they're permanently chilled, like they've made a quiet agreement with the outside world. A draft slips through a seam near the door. Another creeps in near the roofline where the thatch meets the wall. You don't always hear them, but you feel them on your skin like invisible fingers. The thatched roof above you is thick, layered with straw or reeds, packed down to shed rain and snow. In summer, it can seem almost charming. In winter, it becomes something you watch with suspicion. That roof is your shield, but it's also a sponge. It absorbs dampness from fog, drizzle, melting frost. And once moisture gets in, the house changes. Dry cold is harsh. Wet cold is cruel. The dampness makes the air feel heavier. It makes your clothes cling. It makes the straw in your bedding smell sour. It even makes the walls smell different, like the earth itself has crawled inside to live with you. And the worst part is that dampness steals warmth faster than the wind ever could. Your fire works twice as hard, and still the room stays stubbornly chilly. You walk toward the wall and press your palm against it. It's cool, not frozen, but never warm. Like touching a stone that's been sitting in shadow all day. You pull your hand away and flex your fingers, as if the wall has taken something from you. In a way, it has. Every surface in here is part of the battle. The cold doesn't just float in the air, it lives in the floor, it hides in the walls, it settles into wood and refuses to leave. The floor beneath your feet is packed earth, hard and uneven. Some homes have a thin layer of straw scattered across it, mostly to soak up dampness and filth. It helps a little, but not enough. When you stand still, you can feel the cold creeping upward, through your soles, into your ankles. It's slow at first, and then it becomes constant. Like the earth is trying to pull you back down. So you learn early. Never let your feet go numb. Numb feet make clumsy hands. Clumsy hands make accidents. And accidents in winter can be fatal. There isn't much furniture here. A sturdy bench, a rough table. Some hooks and pegs for hanging tools and clothing. Maybe a chest for valuables, if your household has anything worth protecting. The space isn't designed for comfort. It's designed for function. Everything has a job. Every object is placed where it can be reached quickly, because winter is not the time for searching. You can't afford to waste warmth wandering around. The door is a thick plank of wood that never fits perfectly. Even when it's closed, the edges don't align neatly. A thin line of air sneaks in around the frame, cold as river water. If you want to block it, you use what you have. A rolled cloth, a bundle of straw, sometimes even a worn-out cloak pushed against the gap. It's not elegant, but it's effective enough to feel like you've outsmarted the season. At least a little. And then there are the windows. Or what passes for windows. Most peasant homes don't have glass. Glass belongs to churches, to manor houses, to places that can afford delicate things. If you have an opening in the wall, it's small, maybe covered with a thin piece of cloth, or a wooden shutter, or stretched animal hide. It lets in a hint of light when the sun is up, but it also lets in cold. So in winter, you keep it closed as much as possible. That means darkness comes early inside too. The day ends twice, once outside, and once in here. And when the room goes dim, you draw closer to the hearth without thinking. Not because you're dramatic, because your body is honest. It knows where warmth is, and it tries to collect it like a hungry thing. Your home also holds other heat, not just fire. People. You can hear them breathing, shifting, murmuring. Someone stirs near the bed area, another adjusts a blanket. Even the quiet sounds feel important, because they mean the household is still intact, still warm enough to move, still alive. In winter, you measure safety in small signs. A cough is worrying, a shiver is normal. Silence can mean anything. You look up again at the roof beams blackened by years of smoke. Soot lines the wood like old scars. It's ugly, but it's proof that fires have burned here, night after night through countless winters. The house carries its history in stains and smells. Every winter leaves a mark. Every season adds another layer of wear. Sometimes, when the wind hits hard, the roof makes a soft rustling sound, like dry grass being brushed the wrong way. It reminds you that your shelter is made of plants, that your protection is basically woven straw, clinging to a wooden frame, not stone, not brick, just something light enough for wind to argue with, and the wind always argues. You move toward the door again and check the latch, because you've learned to do that without being asked. The door must stay shut, the cold must stay out, and yet, even with every crack plugged, every gap stuffed, every opening sealed as best you can, the house still breathes. You can feel it. A slow exchange of air, a faint pull, a whisper of draft that never fully stops. Your home isn't airtight. It's not meant to be. The materials are too simple, too imperfect. It's shelter, not insulation. And when the night deepens and the cold presses harder, you realise the truth peasants live with every winter. A house doesn't defeat the season. It only gives you a fighting chance. You stare at the hearth again, at the low fire you've nurtured back to life, and you understand what comes next. If the house is your skin, then the fire is your heart. Without it, everything fails. The walls won't save you. The roof won't save you. The blankets won't matter, because the cold will slip in anyway, quietly, patiently. And once it settles deep enough inside the room, it stops being something you notice. It becomes something you endure. So you step closer to the warmth, lower yourself near the embers, and prepare to treat this fire like the most valuable thing you own. Because tonight, it is. And if you lose it, you won't just feel cold, you'll feel helpless. And winter loves helplessness most of all. The fire is small, not because you don't want it bigger, but because winter makes you careful. A roaring blaze looks beautiful in your imagination, bright flames climbing high, filling the room with heat like a blessing. But that kind of fire eats wood fast, and wood is not something you can waste just because you feel cold. Cold is constant. Fuel is not. So you kneel beside the hearth and treat the embers like a living thing. The coals glow softly under a crust of ash, breathing orange light through grey powder. They're fragile, almost shy, and you can tell at a glance whether they're strong enough to last the night. If they fade too much, you'll wake up freezing. If they die completely, you'll have to start again from nothing. And starting again is where winter really punishes you. You don't have matches. You don't have a lighter. You don't have a neat little spark waiting inside your pocket. Fire in your world is earned. It's coaxed into existence with labour and patience, and just enough luck to make you respect it. Sometimes you use flint and steel. You strike hard, over and over, until sparks jump like tiny angry insects. Sometimes you use dried tinder, twisted grass, shredded bark, scraps of cloth that have been worn too thin to keep. The smallest flame is a victory. The smallest curl of smoke means you might survive until morning without your breath turning to ice. And tonight, you're not going to risk losing what you already have. You feed the fire slowly, one stick, then another. You listen to the soft crackle as it catches, the sound of wood surrendering to heat. It's almost comforting, like the room is speaking back to you, reminding you that the fire is alive again, and that the night might be manageable. Almost. Because warmth in a peasant house doesn't spread like it does in modern life. The heat doesn't fill the air evenly. It stays close to the flames, pooling low and near like a shy animal. If you want to feel warm, you have to approach it. You have to sit near enough that your face gets hot while your back stays cold. You have to turn your hands over the heat again and again, warming the palms, then the backs, then the fingers. It's not comfort. It's rationing. And the moment you pull away, the cold reminds you it never left. Your shoulders tighten. Your toes ache. The draft slides in along the floor, crawling around your ankles like icy water. So you keep the fire steady. Not big. Not wasteful. Steady. That's the word winter teaches you. Steady means survival. Fuel comes in different forms depending on what you can get. In some places you burn wood, bundles of sticks, split logs, rough branches gathered with numb hands before the snow thickens. In other places you use peat, cut from bogs and dried into dark blocks that smoulder longer than wood. If you're unlucky, or simply poor enough that nothing else is available, you burn whatever will burn. Twigs, straw, even dried animal dung. The smell isn't pleasant. It clings to everything, but it produces heat, and heat is the only scent that matters in winter. Every household becomes a fuel accountant. You don't just toss wood into the fire because you feel like it. You count it without counting. You look at your pile and see the rest of the month. You see the rest of winter. You imagine the nights ahead, dark, long, damp. And you understand that every stick you throw away too fast is a future hour of cold you're choosing to suffer. And you can't choose to suffer too much, because peasants don't have extra strength stored away. Your body already runs on narrow margins. The cold consumes energy. Work consumes energy. Hunger consumes energy. You need warmth, but you also need tomorrow's warmth. So you find the balance. You learn to build a fire that is more ember than flame. A fire that lasts rather than impresses. You sit and watch it even when you're tired, even when your eyes want to close. Because leaving the fire alone is a gamble. A gust of wind can slip down through the roof and starve it. A poorly placed stick can collapse the coals and smother them. A stray spark can jump where it shouldn't. Fire can keep you alive, but it can also take everything you own in minutes. And in a village built from wood and straw, everyone knows it. A house fire in winter isn't just a disaster, it's a death sentence. So you stay close. You tend the hearth with the quiet seriousness of someone guarding a treasure chest. You move sticks with a piece of wood, not your bare hands. You poke the embers gently, just enough to keep them breathing. You blow softly, not too hard, because too much air makes flame, and flame makes the fire hungry. This is a strange thing to learn. Sometimes you have to stop your own fire from getting stronger, because a fire that burns too bright will burn too fast. You're not aiming for brightness, you're aiming for endurance. And then there's the problem of time. The longest stretch of cold is not the evening. It's not the moment you first crawl into bed. It's the deep hours after midnight when the fire weakens and the world outside becomes silent and heavy. That's when your room feels largest and emptiest. That's when warmth fades from the air so slowly you don't notice until you wake up shivering, teeth tapping, your body forcing you into consciousness with a single brutal message: move or freeze. So peasants develop a skill that feels almost magical. They learn to save fire for the morning. Before you settle down to sleep, you bank the coals. You pull ash over the glowing embers like a blanket, not to smother them, but to protect them. The ash holds heat. It slows the burn. It keeps the coals alive beneath the surface, hidden like a secret. In the morning, when you wake and the room is bitter and numb, you can scrape the ash aside, breathe life into the glow and rebuild the flame without starting from nothing. This is how you cheat winter, not by defeating it, but by refusing to give it everything. You watch the last flame settle lower, and you feel the room trying to become warmer, trying to accept the fire's presence. The smoke rises, thin at first, then thicker, curling upward toward the roof beams. The air smells sharp and dry. The warmth licks your skin. Your fingers stop aching for a few minutes. Your shoulders loosen slightly, and it feels like peace. But peace in winter is never permanent. It's borrowed. It lasts only as long as the fire does. You glance toward your fuel pile again, measuring it with your eyes. A few bundles, a few thicker pieces. Enough maybe, if you're careful. Enough if the weather doesn't turn crueler overnight. Enough if the wind doesn't hammer the roof until dawn. Enough if nobody gets sick and needs heat through the night. So many enoughs. So many conditions. This is what survival looks like in a peasant home. Not one great victory, but hundreds of small decisions made correctly. A careful fire, a covered ember, a hand that doesn't waste. Because in this world, fire is not just warmth. Fire is light. Fire is cooking. Fire is protection. Fire is the thin orange line between you and the cold that waits outside your walls like a patient animal. And as you settle closer to it, watching it breathe and shift and flicker, you begin to understand a truth peasants have always known. Winter isn't beaten with strength, it's beaten with habit. And tonight, your habit begins here, at the hearth, guarding the sun you've built with your own hands. At first, the smoke feels like a small price to pay, a little haze in the air, a faint sting in your eyes, a smell that clings to your hair and clothes. Compared to the cold outside, it almost seems harmless, just another inconvenience, like mud on your shoes or straw in your bedding. But winter doesn't let anything stay small, and the longer you sit near the hearth, the more you realise the smoke isn't just floating above you, it's living with you. It curls up from the fire in thin grey ribbons, then thickens as the flames settle lower and the fuel begins to smoulder. The air changes slowly, the way a room changes when too many people breathe inside it. It becomes heavier. Warmer, yes, but also harsher. Like the warmth itself has teeth. You blink a few times and feel your eyes water. Not from sadness, from survival. Your home doesn't have a perfect chimney. Most peasant homes don't. Some places might have a simple smoke hole in the roof, a dark opening meant to let the worst of it drift away. But even then, the wind decides whether that smoke leaves politely or circles back like it forgot something. And on a cold night the smoke often stays. It rises toward the ceiling beams, trapped under the thatch, gathering there like a low drifting cloud. You can see it in the way the firelight looks softer, blurred at the edges. You can taste it faintly on your tongue. Dry, bitter, like burnt wood and stale ash. Over time, your roof becomes a record of it. The beams above are blackened, stained by years of this slow choking haze. Soot coats the wood like permanent shadow. Even the thatch grows darker inside, the straw taking on the colour of old smoke. Every winter adds another layer, another season of breath and burning, until the house looks like it's been singed by invisible flames. And in a way, it has. You learn where to sit. That's the first skill. Not too close to the fire, where sparks might jump and bite your clothes. Not too far, where the warmth becomes meaningless, but also not too high. Not standing, not lingering upright longer than you must, because the higher you are, the more smoke you breathe. Children learn this early without being told. They crawl and sit low. They play near the ground. The lower air is cleaner, and their bodies already know to seek it. Adults do the same when they can, kneeling, crouching, huddled close, living in the lower half of the room like the space above belongs to something dangerous. The smoke teaches you humility. It forces you down. It keeps you close to the earth. You inhale and your throat scratches. A small cough rises in your chest, and you try to swallow it back because coughing means losing warmth. It shakes your whole body. It makes your ribs ache. It reminds you that your lungs are working harder than they should, pulling in air that isn't truly air anymore. Still, you don't complain. Because what would you trade it for? Cold, clean air that freezes you? Or warm, dirty air that keeps your hands from going numb? In winter, you stop thinking in perfect choices. You think in cruel bargains. And smoke is one of those bargains. It keeps you alive, but it takes something from you little by little. Your eyes sting, your nose runs, your chest tightens. The inside of your home is warm enough to function, but never fresh enough to feel safe. Some nights, if the fire burns wrong, the smoke becomes thick enough to make your head feel light, your thoughts slower, as if your brain is moving through wool. You can almost sense the room turning stale. The air is shared by everyone here. Every breath used, exhaled, reused. Each person adds warmth, but also moisture. And moisture in winter is the enemy hiding inside comfort. It gathers in your clothing. It collects in the straw bedding. It clings to the walls. And now, mixed with smoke, it becomes a kind of invisible fog you live inside. You shift your position and look at your hands. They're dirty. Not just from work, but from life. Soot stains your fingertips even if you haven't touched the coals. Smoke leaves its mark without asking permission. It settles on bowls, on spoons, on hanging cloth. It lands on food. It lands on faces. By spring, everyone smells like the hearth, and no one even notices anymore. It's the village scent. Winter smoke and human breath. You glance over at the pot near the fire. Even if it's empty now, it carries the signs of the hearth. Dark rings, soot smudges, ash flecks. Cooking here is never clean. Every meal comes with a hint of smoke, a taste so normal you stop calling it a taste at all. It's just how food is. And the funny thing, the strange thing, is that the smoke almost becomes comforting after a while, because it means the fire is still alive. Smoke means warmth exists. Smoke means the house is not completely surrendered to the cold, so your body accepts it, even as it suffers from it. Your eyes adjust. Your lungs adapt in the way lungs always adapt when they have no choice. Your head stops noticing the sharpness, until one day you step outside into clean winter air and it hits you like a revelation. Air can be cold and still feel pure. Air can sting your face and still feel kind. Inside, the air is warmer, and it hurts. You look up again, into the smoky layer near the roof, and you notice the slow movement there, as if the house is breathing. The smoke gathers, swirls, thins, thickens again. It never fully leaves. It only rearranges itself like it's searching for a place to settle permanently. And you think about what that means. You are sleeping in this, breathing in it, night after night. It becomes part of your winter, as constant as the cold and the darkness. The smoke also changes the light. Firelight should feel bright, lively, dancing. But with smoke in the air, the light turns softer, dimmer, almost dreamlike. Shadows deepen. Corners vanish into grey. Faces look older in this kind of light, drawn in flicker and haze. Even familiar objects feel stranger. The room seems both close and endless, because you can't see clearly beyond the hearth's reach. And maybe that's why winter nights feel so long. Not just because the hours stretch out, but because you live inside a half-lit world where nothing looks fully awake. You hear someone behind you shift, a blanket rustling, a quiet sigh. You hear the faint crackle of wood as the fire settles. Outside, the wind scrapes against the roof again, and a few pieces of thatch whisper as they rub together. A tiny sound, but in this stillness it feels enormous. Everything is magnified at night, even the way smoke moves. You blink again and wipe at your eye with the back of your hand, smearing soot across your skin. You don't care. Your face is already marked by the season. Everyone's is. Winter leaves its fingerprints on people. Red cheeks, cracked lips, stiff shoulders, eyes that look tired too early in the evening. You shift closer to the hearth again, because the warmth is fading from your fingers. The fire needs feeding. But you hesitate because feeding it means more smoke, more haze, more burning in your eyes. The house always demands something from you. Warmth demands air. Air demands smoke. Smoke demands endurance. So you choose endurance. You place another stick on the coals and watch the flame brighten slightly. The room warms by a thin margin. The smoke thickens for a moment, then rises and spreads above you like a slow storm cloud. And you accept it. Because in this world, comfort isn't silence and softness. Comfort is simple. It's the ability to move your fingers. It's the ability to feel your toes. It's the sound of fire still breathing when everything outside has gone dark. But as you sit there, letting the heat push back against the cold, you realise something else too, something the smoke makes impossible to ignore. Warmth is never free. It always costs something, and tonight you've paid for it with your eyes, your lungs, and the air you share with everyone you love. Now, as the room settles into a smoky, dim hush, another need begins to grow in your stomach. Slow, patient, unavoidable. Because cold doesn't just make you shiver, it makes you hungry. And if you want to survive the longest hours of the night, you'll need more than fire. You'll need food that can fight the season from the inside out. Hunger in winter doesn't feel like a simple emptiness. It feels like cold from the inside, a slow drain, a weakness that spreads through your limbs and turns every movement heavier than it should be. In summer, you can ignore hunger for a while. You can push through it. But in winter, your body demands fuel the way a fire demands wood. Without it, you don't just feel tired, you feel exposed. So when the work ends and the dark settles in, you don't dream of feasts and sweet pastries. You dream of something more practical, something hot, something that stays in your belly like a stone of warmth. The pot near the hearth is your most important piece of cookware. It isn't pretty. It's stained dark from soot and years of use, the metal scarred by heat, the rim rough from being scraped 1,000 times by wooden spoons, but it's dependable. It sits close to the fire like it belongs there, because it does. In a peasant home, the hearth is the kitchen, the heater, and the centre of the entire world, and tonight, dinner is survival. You lift the lid, and a puff of steam rises, thin but precious. Even a little steam feels like comfort, because it means the meal is warm enough to fight the chill in your bones. You stir slowly, watching thick liquid roll over itself in lazy waves. Pottage. It's not glamorous. It's not the kind of meal anyone writes songs about. But it's the meal that keeps people standing through winter. A stew made from whatever you have, whatever you can spare, whatever hasn't spoiled, dried out, or been eaten already. Maybe it's barley, maybe oats, maybe peas, maybe a few onions or leeks, chopped small so the flavour spreads farther than the food itself. Maybe turnips, maybe cabbage, sometimes a bit of dried herb if someone in the household has a good hand for gathering. And if you're lucky, truly lucky, there's a hint of fat in it, a scrap of salted pork, a piece of bacon so small it feels like a rumour. But that little bit changes everything. Fat is winter gold. It doesn't just add taste, it adds strength, it adds warmth. It makes your body feel heavier, more solid, like you've put a layer of insulation inside yourself. Even the smell of it can lift the room's mood. You see shoulders relax. You see people lean in closer. The same stew becomes something closer to hope. You ladle the pottage into bowls, wooden ones, rough and worn, the edges smooth from years of mouths and hands. The bowls feel cold at first, then warm in your grip as the hot food settles into them. That warmth presses into your palms, and for a moment you realise how starved your body is for simple heat. Not fire heat, food heat. You sit near the hearth, because you always sit near the hearth in winter. Everyone does. The room naturally arranges itself around warmth like a flock of birds crowding together against wind. Someone hands you a piece of bread, coarse, dense, dark. Not the white bread of the rich, but the kind made from grains that don't behave politely. It's heavy in your hand, but heavy is good. Heavy means it will last inside you. You tear off a piece and dip it into the stew. The bread drinks it up, softening, becoming easier to chew. You take a bite, and it tastes like smoke, grain, and salt, with a faint sweetness from whatever root vegetable was thrown in. It's not exciting, but it's real. And as you swallow, you feel the warmth spreading through your chest, the way a small fire spreads through a cold room. Slow, steady, patient. The heat doesn't change the world, but it changes you. Your fingers loosen slightly, your shoulders drop a fraction, your stomach stops clenching. This is the thing modern people forget. In winter, eating isn't pleasure first, it's strategy. The cold steals energy even when you're doing nothing. It steals it while you sit, while you sleep, while you breathe. Your body burns fuel just to keep your organs working, just to keep your blood moving, just to keep your hands from turning into useless stiff claws. So peasants eat to defend themselves. Every bite is a shield, and you don't waste it. You eat slowly, not because you're trying to be polite, but because you want the warmth to last. You want the comfort to stretch through the night like a thin blanket, and besides, food is limited. Winter isn't a season when you can grab something else later. If you finish too fast, you're done. The pot doesn't refill itself. You glance toward whatever stores are kept in the house. Sacks, bundles, maybe a hanging piece of dried meat if you're fortunate, maybe a small jar of preserved something. Every household has its own level of scarcity, but every peasant understands the same fear, the slow fear of running out before spring. Winter makes you count meals before you even eat them. It makes you think about the future while your stomach is still empty. And because you know that fear, the taste of food becomes sharper. Not richer, sharper, more meaningful. You eat and you think, we made it through today. That's a real thought. A deep thought. Because not every day ends safely in winter. You hear the scrape of a spoon against a bowl. Someone drinks the last of the broth like it's the most valuable liquid on earth. In a way, it is. Warm broth is warmth you can carry into the next hour. It settles in your belly and radiates outward, pushing back against the cold air that keeps trying to claim you. The fire crackles softly beside you. Smoke drifts above, and for a short moment, the room feels like something close to comfort. Not clean, not quiet, not soft, but stable. You chew another bite of bread and feel the rough grains scratch lightly against your teeth. Your teeth aren't in perfect condition. Nobody's are. This food isn't kind to mouths, but you eat it anyway because your body doesn't care about luxury, it cares about survival. Someone offers a mug of something, not water, almost never water. In winter, water can be risky. Not always deadly, but risky. A village well can be contaminated, a stream can carry sickness, and cold water feels like punishment. So instead, you drink ale, weak, cloudy, low in strength but safer than raw water, and filled with calories your body can burn like fuel. You sip it and feel a little warmth in your throat. Not strong warmth, but enough. Enough to make the night feel possible. The meal ends quietly. Not because everyone is sad, but because winter doesn't encourage celebration unless there's a reason. People don't waste energy on loud joy every night. Joy is saved for feast days, for rare moments when the darkness pauses. Tonight is not that. Tonight is just another winter night, another long stretch between dusk and dawn. You scrape the bowl clean because leaving food behind is unthinkable. Even crumbs matter. Even the last smear of stew can be worth something in the morning when the cold is at its worst. You set the bowl aside and wipe your hands on your clothing because there's no easy washing, no warm water waiting, no clean towels. Life moves on with what it has. And now, with food sitting heavy and warm inside you, you start to feel the real weight of the night ahead. Your eyelids grow heavier, your body craves sleep. But winter sleep isn't the same as normal sleep. It isn't the kind where you fall into softness and wake refreshed. Sleep in a peasant home is something you prepare for like a journey, because the cold doesn't stop while you rest. It watches, it waits, and if you don't layer your clothing right, if you don't position your body close enough to warmth, if you don't guard the fire properly, you can wake up worse than tired. You can wake up shaking. You can wake up sick. You can wake up with hands so stiff you can't work. So the meal is over, but the night's work isn't. You glance toward the bedding area, toward the straw and rough blankets, and you begin to think not about comfort, but about defense. Because the next step is the most important one of all, dressing for sleep like you're putting on armor. Hunger in winter doesn't feel like a simple emptiness. It feels like cold from the inside, a slow drain, a weakness that spreads through your limbs and turns every movement heavier than it should be. In summer, you can ignore hunger for a while. You can push through it. But in winter, your body demands fuel the way a fire demands wood. Without it, you don't just feel tired, you feel exposed. So when the work ends and the dark settles in, you don't dream of feasts and sweet pastries. You dream of something more practical, something hot, something that stays in your belly like a stone of warmth. The pot near the hearth is your most important piece of cookware. It isn't pretty. It's stained dark from soot and years of use, the metal scarred by heat, the rim rough from being scraped 1,000 times by wooden spoons, but it's dependable. It sits close to the fire like it belongs there because it does. In a peasant home, the hearth is the kitchen, the heater, and the centre of the entire world, and tonight, dinner is survival. You lift the lid, and a puff of steam rises, thin but precious. Even a little steam feels like comfort, because it means the meal is warm enough to fight the chill in your bones. You stir slowly, watching thick liquid roll over itself in lazy waves. Pottage. It's not glamorous. It's not the kind of meal anyone writes songs about, but it's the meal that keeps people standing through winter. A stew made from whatever you have, whatever you can spare, whatever hasn't spoiled, dried out, or been eaten already. Maybe it's barley, maybe oats, maybe peas, maybe a few onions or leeks, chopped small so the flavour spreads farther than the food itself. Maybe turnips, maybe cabbage, sometimes a bit of dried herb if someone in the household has a good hand for gathering. And if you're lucky, truly lucky, there's a hint of fat in it. A scrap of salted pork, a piece of bacon so small it feels like a rumour. But that little bit changes everything. Fat is winter gold. It doesn't just add taste, it adds strength. It adds warmth. It makes your body feel heavier, more solid, like you've put a layer of insulation inside yourself. Even the smell of it can lift the room's mood. You see shoulders relax. You see people lean in closer. The same stew becomes something closer to hope. You ladle the pottage into bowls, wooden ones, rough and worn, the edges smooth from years of mouths and hands. The bowls feel cold at first, then warm in your grip as the hot food settles into them. That warmth presses into your palms, and for a moment you realise how starved your body is for simple heat. Not fire heat, food heat. You sit near the hearth, because you always sit near the hearth in winter. Everyone does. The room naturally arranges itself around warmth like a flock of birds crowding together against wind. Someone hands you a piece of bread. Coarse, dense, dark. Not the white bread of the rich, but the kind made from grains that don't behave politely. It's heavy in your hand, but heavy is good. Heavy means it will last inside you. You tear off a piece and dip it into the stew. The bread drinks it up, softening, becoming easier to chew. You take a bite, and it tastes like smoke, grain, and salt, with a faint sweetness from whatever root vegetable was thrown in. It's not exciting, but it's real. And as you swallow, you feel the warmth spreading through your chest, the way a small fire spreads through a cold room. Slow, steady, patient. The heat doesn't change the world, but it changes you. Your fingers loosen slightly. Your shoulders drop a fraction. Your stomach stops clenching. This is the thing modern people forget. In winter, eating isn't pleasure first. It's strategy. The cold steals energy even when you're doing nothing. It steals it while you sit, while you sleep, while you breathe. Your body burns fuel just to keep your organs working, just to keep your blood moving, just to keep your hands from turning into useless stiff claws. So peasants eat to defend themselves. Every bite is a shield. And you don't waste it. You eat slowly, not because you're trying to be polite, but because you want the warmth to last. You want the comfort to stretch through the night like a thin blanket. And besides, food is limited. Winter isn't a season when you can grab something else later. If you finish too fast, you're done. The pot doesn't refill itself. You glance toward whatever stores are kept in the house. Sacks, bundles, maybe a hanging piece of dried meat if you're fortunate. Maybe a small jar of preserved something. Every household has its own level of scarcity, but every peasant understands the same fear. The slow fear of running out before spring. Winter makes you count meals before you even eat them. It makes you think about the future while your stomach is still empty. And because you know that fear, the taste of food becomes sharper. Not richer, sharper, more meaningful. You eat and you think, we made it through today. That's a real thought. A deep thought. Because not every day ends safely in winter. You hear the scrape of a spoon against a bowl. Someone drinks the last of the broth like it's the most valuable liquid on earth. In a way, it is. Warm broth is warmth you can carry into the next hour. It settles in your belly and radiates outward, pushing back against the cold air that keeps trying to claim you. The fire crackles softly beside you. Smoke drifts above. And for a short moment, The room feels like something close to comfort. Not clean, not quiet, not soft, but stable. You chew another bite of bread and feel the rough grains scratch lightly against your teeth. Your teeth aren't in perfect condition, nobody's are. This food isn't kind to mouths, but you eat it anyway because your body doesn't care about luxury. It cares about survival. Someone offers a mug of something, not water, almost never water. In winter, water can be risky. Not always deadly, but risky. A village well can be contaminated. A stream can carry sickness. And cold water feels like punishment. So instead, you drink ale, weak, cloudy, low in strength but safer than raw water, and filled with calories your body can burn like fuel. You sip it and feel a little warmth in your throat. Not strong warmth, but enough. Enough to make the night feel possible. The meal ends quietly. Not because everyone is sad, but because winter doesn't encourage celebration unless there's a reason. People don't waste energy on loud joy every night. Joy is saved for feast days, for rare moments when the darkness pauses. Tonight is not that. Tonight is just another winter night. Another long stretch between dusk and dawn. You scrape the bowl clean, because leaving food behind is unthinkable. Even crumbs matter. Even the last smear of stew can be worth something in the morning when the cold is at its worst. You set the bowl aside and wipe your hands on your clothing because there's no easy washing, no warm water waiting, no clean towels. Life moves on with what it has. And now, with food sitting heavy and warm inside you, you start to feel the real weight of the night ahead. Your eyelids grow heavier. Your body craves sleep. But winter sleep isn't the same as normal sleep. It isn't the kind where you fall into softness and wake refreshed. Sleep in a peasant home is something you prepare for like a journey, because the cold doesn't stop while you rest. It watches. It waits. And if you don't layer your clothing right, if you don't position your body close enough to warmth, if you don't guard the fire properly, you can wake up worse than tired. You can wake up shaking. You can wake up sick. You can wake up with hands so stiff you can't work. So the meal is over, but the night's work isn't. You glance toward the bedding area, toward the straw and rough blankets, and you begin to think not about comfort, but about defense, because the next step is the most important one of all. Dressing for sleep like you're putting on armor. You don't get to undress the way people do in warmer, kinder times. There's no moment where you peel off layers and sigh with relief, letting your skin breathe, letting your body relax into softness. Winter doesn't offer that kind of freedom. Winter makes your clothing feel less like something you wear and more like something you hide inside. So when the meal is finished and the fire settles into a lower, steadier glow, you don't think, time for bed. You think, time to prepare. Because sleep in a peasant house isn't the reward at the end of the day, it's another part of surviving it. You stand near the hearth and feel the warmth pressing weakly against your legs. Your clothes smell of smoke and damp wool, and when you shift your shoulders, the fabric creaks a little, stiff from dirt and dried sweat. You've worn these layers all day. Through work, through wind, through the short, pale daylight. They aren't fresh, they aren't soft, but they are yours, and they are what stands between your body and the cold. The first layer is usually linen. Not luxurious linen like the nobles wear, but rougher, simpler cloth. Something that covers your skin and takes the worst of your sweat and grime. Linen doesn't keep you warm by itself, but it does something important. It keeps the wool from scratching you raw. It makes the rest of the layers bearable. And in winter, anything that makes life bearable matters. Over that comes wool. Wool is the miracle material of your world. Not because it's beautiful, but because it works. It traps air. It holds warmth. And even when it gets damp, as wool often does, it still keeps insulating. That alone makes it priceless. A wool tunic, a wool cloak, wool wrappings around your legs. These aren't just clothes, they're survival tools. You tug the fabric tighter around your shoulders and feel its weight. It isn't heavy like armor, but it feels heavy enough to matter. There's something strange about that weight in winter. It makes you feel protected, even when you know you aren't truly safe. It gives your body the illusion of a shield, and sometimes that illusion is the difference between panic and endurance. You check your sleeves. You pull them down to cover your wrists because wrists are small places where cold sneaks in. It slides into your veins there, spreading upward, making your fingers stiff. You wrap cloth around them if you can, a strip of fabric, a worn tie, anything to close the gap. Peasants become experts at closing gaps, because gaps are how winter wins. Then you look at your legs. Your lower body takes the brunt of cold in a house like this. The floor is packed earth, and even when straw is scattered across it, the chill rises up like fog. It doesn't rush. It doesn't attack in one dramatic wave. It creeps, slow and inevitable, until your feet feel like they've been dipped in ice water. So you wrap your legs carefully. Simple leggings, if you have them. Cloth bindings around the calves, extra layers if you can afford it. And you never forget your feet. Feet are everything. If your feet go numb, you don't just get uncomfortable. You lose balance, you stumble, you drop things. You can't work properly the next day. A peasant body has to function. Survival depends on function. You can't stay in bed all day because you feel cold. You still have chores, animals to feed, water to fetch. Work that doesn't stop just because winter exists. So you treat your feet like treasure. Wool socks if you're lucky. Cloth wraps if you aren't. Sometimes you even sleep with your shoes nearby, because the house is so cold that putting them on in the morning feels like stepping into frozen leather. Better to keep them close, near the fire if possible, so they don't harden overnight. Everything in winter hardens, even things that were once soft. You shift closer to the hearth again and raise your hands to the warmth, flexing your fingers slowly. They still ache, but the aching is a reminder they're alive. You rub your palms together and feel the skin crack slightly, dry from cold air and rough work. Your hands are never fully healed in winter. They're always half recovered and half broken, living in between. You think about undressing more. Maybe removing your outer cloak, maybe loosening your belt, but you hesitate, because the moment you expose skin, the cold bites, and the house isn't warm enough to forgive you for it. So you compromise. You remove only what's necessary. You shake out a cloak and fold it. You loosen tight binding so your blood can move more freely. You keep enough layers on that your body won't lose heat too quickly once you climb into the bed. And then you prepare the final shield, the blanket. It's not the thick down comforter you might dream of. It's rough wool, heavy and scratchy, sometimes patched in places where it's worn thin. It might smell like sheep and smoke. It might be slightly damp if the house has been too humid. But it's what you have, and you learn to treat it with respect. Warmth isn't about softness. Warmth is about coverage. You pull the blanket close to the hearth to take the edge off the cold. You don't leave it there too long, sparks are unpredictable, but you let it hover near warmth like a traveller nearing a campfire. Some families use straw-filled sacks as extra insulation. Others use sheepskins, if they have them, the thick fur turned inward. Furs hold warmth well, but they're also expensive, and peasants rarely have enough to waste on comfort alone. If you have a skin, it's likely earned through hardship, through slaughter, through necessity, and it doesn't smell clean. Nothing smells clean in winter. The air is smoke, the floor is earth, the bedding is straw, the people are tired. Everything becomes a blend of survival scents. Wool, soot, damp wood, animal breath. You get used to it because you have no choice. You look around and see everyone preparing in their own way. A child curled under a blanket early, body already tucked into a ball. An older person shifting closer to the warmest part of the house, because cold reaches elders faster and clings to them longer. Someone adding another stick to the fire, carefully, not greedily, watching the flame rise just enough to matter. You feel the quiet seriousness of it all. No one announces bedtime like it's a pleasant ritual. No one jokes loudly, because winter nights are long, and everyone understands that if something goes wrong, if the fire dies too early, if the roof leaks, if the wind turns savage, sleep will turn into suffering fast. So you prepare as if something might go wrong. That's the mindset. That's the difference. Modern people prepare for sleep as rest. Medieval peasants prepare for sleep as defense. You lower yourself toward the bedding area, feeling your joints protest as you bend. The straw beneath the blanket rustles. It shifts and crackles under your weight like dry grass. You can already feel lumps and uneven patches. You know there will be itching later. You know your skin will react to the tiny hidden irritations inside the straw. But tonight, you're not thinking about itching. You're thinking about warmth. You're thinking about making it through the deepest hours. You curl your body slightly, pulling your knees in, reducing the space the cold can attack. You tuck your arms close to your chest. You position your back towards someone else's warmth, because warmth is shared here. It's not romantic. It's not awkward. It's practical. And then, before you fully close your eyes, you take one last look at the hearth. The fire still glows, low, steady, breathing through ash like a sleeping animal. You know it won't last forever, not without help, not without care. But for now, it's alive. And that gives you permission to try, to let your muscles loosen, to let your thoughts slow, to let the darkness settle without fear taking over. You pull the blanket up to your shoulders, tuck it beneath your chin, and feel the rough wool scrape lightly against your skin. It's not gentle, but it's protective, and in winter, protection is the closest thing you get to comfort. You exhale slowly. A thin cloud of breath rises in the air and disappears. The room is dim. The smoke layer hangs above. The wind whispers at the roof, and you realize as your body sinks into the straw that the hardest part of the night isn't falling asleep. It's staying asleep, because the cold doesn't rest when you do. It waits, it listens, and sometime in the deepest part of the night, it will come back to test you again, quietly, patiently, until you wake and remember where you are, on a straw bed, in a breathing house, in a winter that never stops pressing, and now you finally understand why peasants didn't sleep alone, or lightly, or peacefully. They slept like people guarding a fragile flame, because they were. For a moment, after you pull the blanket up and tuck your arms close to your chest, it almost feels possible. Almost. The fire still glows. The room is quiet, your stomach is warm from the meal. Your muscles, exhausted from the day, begin to loosen in slow waves, the way a tired body always tries to surrender when it finally stops moving. And then the bed reminds you what it really is. Not comfort, not softness, not the kind of place you disappear into. This bed is a pallet of straw and worn cloth laid over a frame of rough boards, or sometimes simply arranged on the earth itself if the household has less to work with. It shifts beneath you when you move, crackling and compressing, forming lumps that never quite smooth out. You can feel every uneven patch through the blanket. One spot presses too hard against your hip. Another rises into the curve of your back like a stone hidden under hay. You adjust, searching for the least miserable position. Not the best one. There is no best one. Only the one you can endure long enough to fall asleep. The straw smells dry, but underneath that dryness is something older. A stale scent that tells you the bedding has been slept on night after night, winter after winter, absorbing human breath and sweat and the faint dampness that creeps into everything. Straw doesn't stay fresh for long. It breaks, it flattens, it turns brittle, and it becomes home to tiny things that love warmth as much as you do. You feel the first itch before you even close your eyes. A faint tickle along your ankle, quick and delicate. You ignore it. Then another along your calf. You ignore that too. Because if you stop to scratch every itch, you'll never sleep at all. Fleas, lice, small parasites that don't care about the cold as long as they have a warm body to live on. Winter doesn't kill them. If anything, it brings them closer. It drives them into bedding and clothing, into hair and seams, into every fold of fabric where they can hide. They are part of the season, part of the house, part of life. You learn to accept them the same way you accept smoke and drafts and rough food. Not because you're happy about it, but because complaining doesn't change anything. Your hands are already cracked and sore. Your nails already hold traces of dirt and soot no matter how much you scrape, and your skin will itch whether you scratch it or not. So you don't waste energy fighting a battle you can't win. Instead, you focus on the battle you can win. Warmth. You curl tighter, reducing the space the cold can reach. You tuck your feet under your legs if you can, protecting them from the air that moves low along the floor. You press your arms closer to your chest, because the heat you create needs to stay with you. Your body is a small furnace, but it leaks warmth quickly. Your job is to leak less. The blanket is heavy wool, rough and stubborn. It doesn't glide across your skin the way modern fabric does. It grips, it scratches. It reminds you it came from an animal, spun by hand, woven with effort. It carries the faint smell of smoke, because it's lived near the hearth its whole life. It carries the faint smell of sheep, because wool never fully forgets what it once was. You pull it higher anyway. Wool might be unpleasant, but it works. Wool traps warmth. Wool forgives dampness. Wool is winter's closest ally. But even wool has limits, because the bed is not empty. The bed is shared. That's the most important truth. In a medieval peasant home, you don't sleep alone unless you have no choice. The idea of one person taking a whole bed in winter feels almost absurd, not because peasants have no concept of privacy, but because winter has no respect for privacy. Winter forces bodies together the way wind forces leaves into piles. Heat is communal. You feel another person shift beside you. Someone's shoulder moving, someone's blanket rustling, someone turning to find a warmer angle. The bed creaks softly. The straw crackles again. In the dim light you can't see faces clearly, but you know the shapes. The familiar weight of the household around you. Family, relatives. Sometimes children piled in like small animals seeking warmth. Sometimes an elder positioned carefully between others, protected from the worst of the cold because their body can't fight it the same way anymore. There's no polite spacing, no careful distance. Everyone learns where to place themselves for the night like pieces on a board. The warmest spots go to the smallest, the weakest, the ones who would suffer fastest. Not because anyone is generous all the time, but because winter teaches brutal priorities. If a child grows sick, the household loses a future worker. If an elder freezes, the household loses knowledge and stability. Every body matters. So bodies are arranged like a winter strategy. You feel the heat of another person's back through layers of cloth. It's faint, but it matters. In a room where the air is cold and constantly moving, even a small shared warmth feels like a barrier. You press closer without thinking. It isn't romantic, it isn't awkward, it's survival. Your own breath fogs the air near your face. You can see it sometimes, pale and fleeting, a ghost of warmth leaving you. You try to breathe slower, quieter. Not because you're trying to be peaceful, but because breathing hard feels like wasting heat. You want the warmth inside your chest to stay there, not escape into the room and vanish. The bed feels cramped, but cramped is good. Cramped means warm. You shift again, and the straw moves under you like dry waves. Another itch rises near your wrist. You rub it once, quickly, then stop. You don't want to wake fully. The moment you wake fully, you notice everything. The cold, the smoke, the stiffness in your joints, the way your stomach is warm but your toes are still slightly numb. Sleep is fragile. And winter is always waiting to break it. You listen to the room. The fire gives a soft crackle, like it's talking to itself. Above, the smoke layer holds steady, drifting in lazy motion. Someone coughs once from the far side of the house, a short sound that disappears quickly. Another person sighs, long and heavy, as if the day is still resting on their chest. Outside, the wind scrapes along the thatch roof, a low whispering sound that never fully stops. It's the kind of noise you start to hear in your dreams, blending with your thoughts until you can't tell whether it's real or imagined. The house creaks faintly, wood shifting as temperature changes, as if the building is settling deeper into the night. The sound isn't loud, but in the quiet it feels like a warning. The world is still here. The world is cold. And the world hasn't forgotten you. You pull the blanket tighter around your shoulders and feel the rough fabric scratch your neck. It irritates you, but it also blocks air from slipping inside. You tuck the edge beneath your chin, trying to keep warm air trapped close to your skin. If the blanket opens even slightly, cold will rush in and steal everything you've built. Warmth is built slowly. Cold takes it instantly. You close your eyes and try to sink into sleep. Your body wants it. Your bones feel heavy. Your eyelids press down like weights. But the bed keeps reminding you of its roughness, its lumps, its small hidden discomforts. Each itch is a tiny spark of awareness. Each shift of straw is a reminder you're lying on something alive with movement and noise. And yet, despite all of that, you begin to feel something else. A strange kind of security, because you're not outside. You're not alone. You're wrapped in wool, surrounded by human heat, with a fire still breathing in the hearth. This is what medieval comfort looks like. Not clean sheets, not silence, not softness. Just enough warmth to stop shivering. Just enough shelter to keep the wind from touching your skin directly. Just enough shared breath and body heat to make the night feel survivable. You let your muscles loosen again. Your fingers relax. Your breathing slows. The itching becomes background noise, like the distant murmur of the wind. And slowly, carefully, you begin to drift. But even as sleep approaches, you sense the truth beneath it. The bed is not a guarantee. The blanket is not a guarantee. The warmth beside you is not a guarantee. Everything you have tonight is temporary. Borrowed from the fire, borrowed from each other, borrowed from the house that keeps breathing against the cold. And sometime soon, when the embers fade lower and the room cools, winter will test you again. Quietly, patiently, without mercy. For now, you sleep anyway. Because in the medieval world, you don't wait for perfect conditions. You rest when you can. You take warmth when it's available. You close your eyes while the fire still lives. And you hope the morning finds you still human, still moving, still strong enough to rise and do it all again. Even in sleep you can hear them. A soft shifting sound in the dark. A slow exhale, heavy and warm. The faint scrape of hoof against packed earth. It's not loud, not dramatic, but it's constant enough to remind you that you aren't the only living thing sharing the shelter tonight. In winter, animals don't stay politely outside. Not if you want them alive. Not if you want yourself alive. Because the cold treats livestock the way it treats people, without sympathy. And for a peasant household, losing an animal is not just losing meat or milk. It's losing the future. It's losing labour. It's losing the thin line between making it through winter and collapsing under it. So the animals come close, sometimes in the same building, sometimes in an attached shelter pressed up against the house. Sometimes separated only by a rough wooden partition that does more to suggest a boundary than actually create one. And in the deep hours of the night, when the fire is low and the air inside your home begins to sharpen again, the animals become something else entirely. A heater. A breathing source of warmth you can't afford to ignore. You don't wake fully at first. You're half drifting, caught between dreams and the dim reality of the hut. But then you feel it. A subtle change in the air. A thickness. A warmth that isn't coming from the hearth anymore. Because the hearth is fading. It's coming from somewhere lower, somewhere heavier. The animals. A cow's body holds heat like a great warm stone. Even if you never touch it, even if it isn't directly beside you, its presence changes the whole space. It makes the air less hostile. It pushes back against the cold that creeps along the floor. It fills the room with slow, steady warmth, the way the fire fills it with flickering warmth. And unlike fire, the animal doesn't die down overnight. It simply breathes. The smell reaches you too, impossible to avoid, a blend of hay and animal sweat and damp hide. Not fresh, not pleasant. But winter doesn't care about pleasant. Winter cares about what keeps blood moving. You shift slightly beneath the blanket and feel the straw crackle. Someone else stirs. A child makes a soft sound, then settles again. The household is pressed together in its usual winter shape, but the animal warmth changes the feeling of the night. It makes the hut feel less like a box of cold air and more like a living nest. Still, animals come with problems. They always do. A cow might be heat, but it is also noise. It shifts its weight with a slow groan of wood and muscle. It steps once, then again, hooves thudding softly. It can cough. It can snort. It can stamp a foot impatiently. A goat might bleat in its sleep. Chickens might rustle on their perch, feathers stirring. Rats might scurry toward any spilled grain. And all of those sounds in the darkness do something strange to your mind. They make you listen. Winter sleep is never deep, because the world demands awareness. A peasant learns to rest lightly, not because they want to, but because danger doesn't announce itself politely. A storm might tear at the roof. A thief might test the door. An animal might panic. So even while you try to drift, you keep one ear open to the room's life. The animals don't just bring warmth, they bring responsibility. If the cow gets sick, you notice. If it stops breathing normally, you notice. If it shifts too much, you notice. Because the animal is not separate from you. It's not a pet, not a luxury. It's a piece of your survival, as important as the food in the pot and the fire in the hearth. In the dark, you imagine what the animal is thinking. It doesn't understand winter as a season. It doesn't think about spring coming. It only feels the cold and searches for warmth the way you do. It huddles where it can. It breathes slowly. It waits out the long hours, and in that, it's almost human. Almost. You adjust the blanket again and feel the rough wool scratch your neck. You're warmer now than you were an hour ago, but the warmth isn't clean. It's mixed with the smell of smoke and damp earth and animal breath. The air is thick, shared, used. It makes your throat feel dry. And you swallow once, tasting soot. This is the trade. Warmth for discomfort. Warmth for smell. Warmth for the constant presence of other living bodies in your personal space. And you accept it because you have to. The richest people in the world might sleep alone in a private chamber. They might shut their doors and imagine the cold as something outside, something distant. You don't have that luxury. Your home is an ecosystem. Humans and animals and fire and damp air and smoke. All of it pressed together inside one small structure, holding each other up through the long winter night. You hear the cow exhale again, a slow, warm sigh, and you feel a strange comfort in it. That breath means it is alive. That breath means it is still producing warmth. That breath means you still have milk in the days ahead. Still have labour when the fields thaw, still have something to barter if things grow desperate. That breath means the household is still standing, and the household standing means you have a chance. Somewhere near the edge of sleep, you feel the deep instinct peasants live by. Protect what protects you. Animals are wealth, but they are also warmth, and warmth in winter becomes priceless. So you keep them close. You listen for their movements. You learn to tolerate their smell. You forgive their noises. Because a peasant's winter isn't about purity or comfort. It's about staying alive in a world that wants to freeze everything still. Your eyelids flutter. Your body tries to sink again into sleep. The warmth in the room is better now, but you know it won't last forever. The fire is fading. The coals are hidden under ash. The air will cool again. The night will stretch on, slow and relentless. And outside, beyond the walls and the roof and the low glow of the hearth, the winter darkness presses closer. That's the part people don't imagine correctly. It isn't just cold out there. It's silence. It's emptiness. It's a world where a single mistake can leave you lost, sick, or dead before morning. So even inside your hut, even with the cow's warmth and your family's breath around you, you don't fully relax. You can't. Winter doesn't allow full relaxation. You live in a state of endurance, warm enough to sleep, aware enough to wake. And as you drift again, you understand something simple and heavy. This is why peasants survived winter nights the way they did. Not through romance, not through heroic strength, but through closeness, through shared heat. Through living with the animals they depended on, pressed together in the dark, breathing the same air, holding on until dawn returned and the world, for a little while, let them move again. The moment the last ember dims, the world changes shape. Not because the house suddenly collapses into cold, but because the darkness outside becomes heavier, more complete, more present. It presses against your door like a hand testing the wood. It presses against the roof like a weight. And even though you can't see it, you feel it. That's the strangest thing about winter nights. They have texture. The air outside is thick with cold, and the village goes quiet in a way that doesn't feel peaceful. It feels cautious. The kind of quiet that comes when everyone is listening for the same thing. A crack, a footstep, a sound that doesn't belong. Inside the hut you shift under the blanket, half awake now, pulled back by a subtle sense of unease. It isn't panic. It's older than panic. It's instinct. The understanding that nighttime isn't simply the end of work. It's a different world, one that has its own rules. In daylight you can see danger coming. You can watch a stranger on the road. You can notice a storm building in the sky. You can smell smoke from far away and know a fire has started. But at night, your eyes are useless. The cold steals sound, making the world strangely muted. And whatever moves outside can move unseen. That's why winter darkness feels like it belongs to the unknown. You hear the wind again, sliding along the roof thatch, and it sounds like whispering. It can almost convince you there are voices out there, just beyond the walls, speaking in a language you can't understand. Then you realise it's only wind, and for a moment you feel foolish, but not for long. Because winter nights are full of things you can't explain, even when they have ordinary causes. A branch scraping wood can sound like someone trying the wall. A distant animal cry can sound like a warning. Even your own house settling can sound like footsteps in the dark. And when you live in a world without streetlights, without glass windows, without any certainty beyond the reach of firelight, your mind becomes alert in a different way. It fills gaps. It imagines shapes. It turns silence into a question. You try to sleep again, but you listen. That is what winter makes you do. Listen. From somewhere outside, far enough to be uncertain, you hear a sound. A faint howl stretched long and thin by distance. It might be a wolf. It might be a dog. It might be the wind doing something strange against a hollow tree. But your body reacts as if it's a wolf. Because wolves are real. They aren't legends in your world. They aren't creatures from bedtime stories. They're hungry animals that live beyond the village boundaries, in forests and hills and cold places where peasants rarely go unless they must. In winter, food is scarce for wolves too. Hunger pushes them closer. It makes them bolder. It teaches them the same lesson winter teaches you. Survival comes before fear. Most nights, wolves won't enter a village. The noise and smell of humans is a strong deterrent. The presence of fire is even stronger. But the fear still exists because fear is not always logical. Fear doesn't care about statistics. Fear cares about the one time something happened and everyone remembered it forever. You've heard stories, a sheep taken from a pen, a dog found torn in the snow, footprints near the edge of the houses when the ground was soft enough to show them. Maybe you've never seen a wolf up close, but you've seen the way people lock their doors tighter when winter deepens. You've seen how men keep tools close at hand in case they need to defend the animals. You've seen the way children are called inside before sunset, not because they're lazy, but because darkness changes the world. The door to your hut is barred, not with complicated locks, but with simple, solid determination. A wooden beam, a heavy latch, something that stops a human hand and maybe stops more than that. Not because thieves are common every night, but because thieves are possible, and in winter, possibility is enough. Thieves don't always steal because they're evil. Sometimes they steal because they're cold. Sometimes they steal because their own fuel ran out. Sometimes they steal because winter turns desperation into action. A peasant understands that. That's what makes the fear sharper. You can't just hate the idea of a thief. You can imagine being one if the season pushed you far enough. That thought makes you pull the blanket tighter. Your room is quiet except for the soft breathing of others and the occasional movement of animals. The fire is low now, mostly embers under ash. Shadows stretch across the walls, thick and uncertain. In this dimness, the hut feels both small and endless. Every corner is a mystery. Every shape is a question. You turn your head slightly, trying to see the door. It's just wood, just a simple barrier. But tonight, it feels like a boundary between life and whatever waits outside. Winter darkness is not just lack of light, it's isolation. It's the feeling that if you stepped outside right now, you would vanish into the night, swallowed by cold air and silence. There would be no lantern to guide you, no road visible, no familiar shape to follow, just blackness, wind, and the ache of frozen breath. That's why peasants don't wander at night in winter. They don't go searching for things unless they have to. They don't take risks unless the risk of staying inside becomes worse. And that's rare. You hear a small scrape from outside. Your muscles tense instantly. Not the slow tension of discomfort, but the sharp tension of alertness. You hold your breath, listening harder. The scrape comes again, then stops. It might be nothing. A branch dragged by wind, an animal shifting near a fence. Snow sliding off a roof somewhere nearby, but you don't relax, because you can't confirm anything. You can't look out a window and see. You can't step outside and check without exposing yourself to freezing air. So you lie there, eyes open in the darkness, and you feel the quiet fear that lives in winter homes. A fear that doesn't scream. A fear that sits calmly beside you, patient as the cold. After a long moment, the sound doesn't return. The household breathes on. Someone rolls over, blanket rustling. A cow exhales heavily. The hut remains intact. The door remains shut, and slowly your body releases its tension. Just a little. Winter nights are built from moments like this. Small scares, small silences, small reminders that you are safe only as long as your barriers hold, as long as fire exists, as long as others breathe nearby. You close your eyes again and try to let sleep return, but the darkness has already done its work. It has reminded you that survival isn't just about heat, it's about safety. It's about staying hidden and held together while the world outside becomes wild and uncertain. And in the deep hours of winter night, when the village is still and the wind never fully stops, you begin to understand why people cling so tightly to the idea of home. Not because home is comfortable, but because home is the only place where the darkness can't touch you directly. At least, not yet. And as you drift again, you feel the night stretching onward, long and cold and listening. The rules of darkness remain. Stay inside, stay close, stay quiet, and make it to morning. In the deepest part of the night, when the fire has settled into a faint glow and the world outside feels too large and too silent, your mind does something predictable. It searches for meaning. Not because you're poetic, because you're human. Cold is one thing when you can see it. When you can feel the wind on your face. When you can watch frost form on the ground. When you can rub your hands together and complain with everyone else. But cold in the dark is different. It becomes invisible. It becomes something that creeps into the room without being seen, something that sits on your chest while you sleep and makes your breath shallow. And when you can't fight something directly, you start fighting it another way, with ritual, with belief, with the small traditions that make the night feel less like a wild, empty thing, and more like a world that still has order. You lie in the straw and listen to the household breathing around you. A child makes a soft sound in sleep, then quiets. Somewhere close, the cow shifts, hooves scraping lightly. The wind presses against the roof again, and the hut answers with a faint creak, like a tired body turning in bed. Then you hear it. A whisper. Not outside. Inside. A soft murmur near the hearth, almost hidden under the crackle of embers. Someone is awake. Maybe an older woman. Maybe a mother. Maybe the kind of person who always wakes when the fire drops too low, as if their body is tuned to the danger. You can't see clearly, but you sense the shape of them in the dimness, hunched near the warmth, hands moving with careful slowness. And you hear the words again. A prayer. Not loud, not dramatic. Just a low, steady stream of sound, as familiar as the smell of smoke. The kind of prayer spoken so often it becomes less like a request and more like a habit, like sweeping a floor or stirring a pot. In winter, prayers aren't always desperate. Sometimes they're simply maintenance, like patching a roof before it leaks. You grew up with these words. Everyone did. The church is part of your world, whether it comforts you or not. Its bells mark time. Its rules shape your days. Its stories explain why suffering exists and why endurance matters. When winter is harsh, people cling to those explanations, because the alternative is to stare into the cold and admit it doesn't care. So you listen. The prayer rises and falls soft as breath, and it does something strange to you. It slows your heartbeat. It makes the darkness feel less crowded. The hut remains small, the wind remains loud, the cold remains present, but the words put a thin layer between your mind and fear, a mental blanket, and prayer is only one piece of it. Because peasants don't live in a world of neat categories. Religion and superstition don't stay politely separated. They blend the way smoke and air blend in your home. You might wear a small cross, but you might also keep an old charm in the corner of the room, a bundle of herbs, a worn token, something passed down by someone who survived winters before you were born. People don't always admit it openly, but they do it. They hang little protective objects near the door. They whisper certain words before sleep. They avoid saying certain names at night, as if the wrong sound might invite something in. They teach children to respect the dark, not because the dark is magical, but because it's dangerous, and danger always feels magical when you can't see it. The hut holds these beliefs like it holds warmth, quietly, constantly. Near the wall, where the shadows are thickest, you can just make out a small mark. Maybe chalk, maybe charcoal. A simple symbol drawn long ago. It might have been placed there by someone who swore it kept sickness away, or kept bad spirits out, or kept the roof from collapsing during storms. Does it work? You don't know. But winter isn't a season that rewards certainty. Winter rewards whatever helps people sleep. And sometimes the difference between surviving and collapsing isn't physical strength, it's mental stability. The ability to close your eyes and let rest happen even when the night is brutal. So you let yourself believe a little. Not the grand belief of kings and priests, the small belief of tired people, the belief that tomorrow will come, the belief that the roof will hold, the belief that the fire will still be there when you wake, the belief that you will not be the one who gets sick this week. In a peasant household, sickness is always nearby in winter. Someone always coughs, someone always sneezes, someone always looks too pale, and because medicine is uncertain, because food is limited, because bodies are already exhausted, people turn to whatever comforts them. Warm broth, a hot stone wrapped in cloth, herbs steeped in water, and prayer. You hear the whispering stop. The person by the hearth shifts again, maybe placing another small stick on the embers, maybe pulling ash over the coals to bank them. Their silhouette looks almost carved out of smoke and firelight. They aren't heroic, they're just doing what has to be done. But in this world, that is a kind of heroism. The wind howls softly outside, not like an animal, but like the world itself exhaling. The sound slides around the hut and fades, and the silence that follows feels deeper than before. A silence that makes you aware of your own breathing, your own warmth, your own fragile existence inside walls made of mud and straw. You think about saints, winter saints. Not because you've read books or studied calendars, but because you've heard their names spoken in cold seasons. Certain feast days that puncture the long dark with moments of meaning. People talk about them not only as holy figures but as anchors, proof that time is still moving forward, proof that winter is not endless. When the days are short, you need markers. You need a reason to count the weeks. You need something to look toward besides the return of green grass. So the names of saints become part of endurance, the same way songs do, the same way stories do, the same way a familiar prayer can calm a frightened child enough to sleep. The belief isn't always pure, it isn't always perfect, but it is useful, and usefulness is what peasants value most. Your eyes grow heavier again, your body sinks deeper into the straw. The itch of fleas is still there, but it fades into background noise. The blanket scratches your neck, but it also blocks drafts. The room smells of smoke and animal breath, but it's warmer than the night outside. You're surrounded by small protections: wool, bodies, embers, wood, habit, and belief. You don't know if belief changes anything in the world beyond the hut. You don't know if it pushes back the cold, or keeps sickness away, or stops wolves from coming too close. But it changes something inside you. It gives you permission to rest, to stop listening so sharply, to stop imagining footsteps at the door, to stop waiting for disaster in every silence, for a while at least. So you close your eyes again, letting the final warmth of prayer settle over the room like soft ash, and you drift deeper into sleep, held not just by blankets and fire, but by the oldest human instinct of all. When the night is too powerful, you make it smaller with words. The cold doesn't just sit on your skin, it works its way inward. It slips past wool and straw and shared body heat, past the thin defences you've built, and it starts to change you from the inside, slowly, quietly, like something patient that knows it has all night. At first it feels harmless. A little shiver, a stiff neck, toes that ache until you curl them tighter under the blanket. But winter sickness rarely announces itself with drama. It arrives the way the season arrives, gradually and then all at once. You wake sometime in the dark hours, not fully awake, just pulled up from sleep by a small discomfort you can't ignore. The hut is quieter now. The household breathes in heavy rhythm, deeper and slower. The fire has fallen into its lowest state, a faint orange glow under ash. The air feels sharper, thinner, as if the warmth has been drained while you weren't looking, and your throat feels dry. Not the simple dryness of sleep, a scratchy dryness, like smoke has lined the inside of you with sand. You swallow once, then again. It doesn't help much. You try to take a deeper breath and your chest resists slightly, as if the air is heavier than it should be. It's subtle. You might have ignored it in summer, but winter makes you notice small changes because small changes are how trouble begins. You listen to the room again. Somewhere nearby, someone coughs. Not a violent cough, not a dramatic hacking fit. Just one cough, short, controlled. But it echoes in the darkness like a warning bell. In a peasant home, a cough isn't just a cough. It's a question mark. Is it smoke irritation? Is it a cold? Is it something worse? Because the air you breathe in winter is rarely clean. It's smoke-filled, damp with shared breath, and thick with the scent of animals living too close. Your lungs spend months working harder than they should, and they don't get thanked for it. They're simply expected to keep going, and most of the time they do, until they don't. Winter illness begins as discomfort, but it can deepen fast. Cold weakens the body's resistance. Smoke irritates the chest. Damp clothing chills you for hours without you realizing how much warmth you've lost. Then the night comes, and instead of resting, your body spends its energy fighting to stay warm, and the energy you spend staying warm is energy you can't spend healing. That's the hidden cruelty. You turn slightly under the blanket and feel the straw shift beneath you. A faint chill creeps along your shoulder where the blanket has loosened. You pull it tight again, tucking it under your chin, trapping your breath close to your face. Some people do that on purpose, breathing warm air into the blanket to create a tiny pocket of comfort. It helps a little, but it also makes the air feel stale, and you have to choose between warmth and freshness even in the smallest moments. You breathe in again, slow and careful. Your nose stings slightly, your chest feels tight, and you wonder if you're getting sick. Because in winter, everyone wonders that. Everyone listens to their own body and tries to measure its strength like a farmer measuring stores before the snow deepens. You don't have the luxury of being sick for days. You don't have the luxury of lying still and drinking warm tea until you feel better. Work does not pause. Chores do not pause. Hunger does not pause. The only thing that pauses in winter is mercy. If you get sick, you still have to function. And that's what makes sickness terrifying. Not because it hurts, but because it threatens the fragile balance that keeps you alive. You think of the people who don't recover quickly. The older ones, whose bones already ache in cold weather, who move slower even on good days. The very young, whose bodies lose heat fast and can't explain what hurts. The ones who are already thin from weeks of hard meals and missing calories. Winter doesn't just test strength, it punishes weakness. And weakness can be as small as one night of too little warmth. Sometimes illness begins with the hands. You wake, and your fingers feel stiff, clumsy, as if they don't belong to you. The joints ache. You rub them together, but friction doesn't fix deep cold. Deep cold sits inside bone. Sometimes illness begins with the feet, a numbness that lingers too long, a tingling ache that doesn't fade when you shift your position. It's not frostbite, not usually, not inside the hut, but it's the warning version of it, the reminder that your body is right on the edge of what it can tolerate. And sometimes illness begins with breath, a cough that repeats, a chest that feels heavy, a throat that burns. You listen again, and that same person coughs once more, this time slightly wetter, slightly deeper. The sound fades quickly, muffled by blankets, but it leaves a cold trace in your mind, because you've seen what winter coughs can become. A cough turns to fever, a fever turns to weakness, weakness turns to missed work turns to less food turns to a body that can't fight anything at all. In the medieval world, a simple sickness can spiral the way a fire can spread through straw, quietly at first, then suddenly unstoppable. So people do what they can. They warm stones near the hearth and wrap them in cloth, placing them near aching feet or beside a child's ribs. They mix herbs into hot water, if they have herbs. They add honey when they can afford it, though honey is a rare treasure, not a daily medicine. They rub chest and throat with oils or animal fat, not because it's scientifically perfect, but because warmth on the skin feels like help. And they pray. Because when you live without certainty, you reach for anything that might shift the odds, even if only in your mind. You pull the blanket tighter around you and try to settle back into sleep. You force your breathing to slow. You try to relax your shoulders. You try to convince your body that it's safe enough to rest. Because rest is the real medicine you can afford. But rest is hard when the room is cooling. The fire is low, the wind is steady outside, and the cold keeps returning like it's checking whether you're still awake. You tuck your hands beneath your chest to keep them warm. You press your feet together. You curl into a tighter shape, making yourself smaller, harder for the cold to reach. This is what peasants do without thinking. They turn into survival animals at night, conserving heat the way a bird tucks its head under its wing. Slowly, your breathing steadies. Your eyelids grow heavier, but even as sleep pulls you back down, you understand the truth that lingers over every winter night. The cold isn't always the enemy you feel immediately. Sometimes it waits. Sometimes it settles inside you quietly. and by the time you realise you're truly sick, winter has already taken a step ahead. Even in winter, the night doesn't belong entirely to sleep. Not for peasants. Sleep happens when it can, but the hours after dark still have weight, still have purpose. Because winter isn't a season where you rest more. It's a season where you survive more carefully. And careful survival takes work. Quiet work, done close to the hearth, in the dim breath of firelight. You sit up slowly, not because you're wide awake, but because your body has learned to move when it needs to. The fire is low, hidden beneath ash, glowing like a small eye watching the room. Shadows stretch across the walls. Smoke hangs above in its usual layer, thickest near the roof beams. Everything smells of soot and damp wool, and when you inhale, you can still feel that scratch in your throat. You can't always fix discomfort, but you can keep moving. Someone near the hearth is already awake, hands busy. Maybe it's mending a tear in cloth. Maybe it's twisting cord. Maybe it's sharpening a blade on a stone, slow and steady, careful not to waste effort. Winter turns every tool into something sacred. A broken knife is not just an inconvenience, it's danger, it's lost work, it's hunger later. So you work by firelight, not loud work, not heavy work, the small tasks that keep life stitched together. A needle passes through fabric, a thread is pulled tight, a worn sleeve is patched, a hole in a cloak is closed before it becomes a doorway for cold air. You watch the hands move and realise how much of winter survival is hidden in simple skill, in the ability to repair, in the patience to keep something alive longer than it deserves. Clothing is not fashion here. Clothing is insulation. A cloak is a blanket you carry. A hood is warmth you pull over your skull. A scarf is a barrier for your throat. And in winter, you don't throw these things away when they wear out. You patch them. You reinforce them. You make them last through the season because the season will not forgive you for showing up unprepared. You feel your fingers stiffen again and bring them closer to the embers. The warmth is weak, but it's enough to loosen your joints, enough to keep your hands useful. You rub your palms together and notice the cracked skin, the roughness, the little wounds that never fully heal. In winter, even your body becomes a tool that needs constant maintenance. Someone stirs the ashes lightly, checking the coals, not waking the fire too much, just making sure it still lives beneath its grey blanket. The fire has to be saved for morning. That's the rule. The long hours before dawn are always the coldest, and if the fire burns too hard now, there will be nothing left when you truly need it. So everything is measured. Every stick of wood, every movement, every breath. You glance toward the bedding where others sleep. The children are curled into tight shapes, their blankets pulled high. The older ones breathe slowly, faces turned toward warmth. The animals shift again, hooves scraping, a soft sound like the house itself moving in sleep. The whole hut feels like a single creature. Bodies, fire, straw, smoke, breath. All of it pressed into one fragile shelter, and somehow it holds. Then, in the middle of this quiet work, you hear something outside that isn't wind. A voice, not sharp, not alarming, a human voice, low and familiar. Someone is at the door, not a stranger, not a threat, a neighbour. Winter changes the way people live together. In warmer seasons, everyone has work to do outside. Fields pull you apart, tasks scatter you across the village. But winter squeezes life inward. It pushes people closer. It makes households depend on each other in small ways that are almost invisible until you need them. A neighbour might come with news, or a piece of kindling, or a warning that the storm is getting worse, or just company, because loneliness is another kind of cold. The door opens briefly, and a slice of freezing air cuts into the room like a blade. Instantly, the warmth you've been building retreats. You feel it vanish from your skin. Everyone shifts, half awake now, bodies responding to the intrusion of winter. The neighbour steps in quickly and shuts the door behind them, breath fogging in the dim light. Their face is red from cold. Their cloak is stiff with frost. They don't stay long. Nobody stays long, because heat is too precious to waste on open doors. But those few moments matter. A short exchange of words, a quick nod, a murmured, "How are you holding up?" That means more than it should. A shared understanding that everyone is facing the same night, and that survival is not individual, it's collective. Sometimes neighbours share food on the harshest nights, a little extra broth, a crust of bread, a small handful of dried peas, not because they are rich enough to be generous easily, but because they know what it means to have nothing. They know what desperation does. And they know that a village survives winter better when households don't fall one by one. Even a few words exchanged in firelight can feel like warmth. Not physical warmth, something else. A reminder that winter hasn't taken everything. People still speak. People still help. People still show up at the door with their faces raw from wind, saying, without saying it, "You're not alone in this." When the neighbour leaves, the door closes again, sealing the hut back into its smoky, dim hush. The cold tries to creep in, but slowly the room returns to its fragile balance. Someone settles back down, someone adjusts a blanket, someone feeds the embers one small stick, just enough to keep the glow alive, and you realise, in the quiet after the visit, that this is how peasants survive the bitter cold nights, not through comfort, through routine, through repair, through shared warmth of bodies, of animals, of fire, and sometimes when the darkness feels too heavy, through the simple strength of a neighbour's voice at the door, proving that the village is still breathing alongside you. The worst part of a winter night isn't the beginning. It isn't the moment you first crawl onto the straw bed and feel the cold still clinging to your clothes. It isn't even the first time you wake shivering, surprised by how quickly warmth disappears. The worst part is the stretch of hours when the night feels endless, when the fire is at its weakest, when the hut is at its coldest, when the world outside seems silent enough to swallow everything. You wake again, half dreaming, because your body refuses to let you sink too deep. Sleep is never fully safe in winter. Even rest must stay alert. One part of your mind listening for danger while the other tries to escape into darkness. The air in the hut is colder now. Not unbearable yet, but sharp enough to make your nose sting when you inhale. Your breath is visible again, a faint pale cloud hovering near your face before it dissolves. The blanket still covers you. The wool still scratches, but the warmth you built earlier has thinned. It leaks away minute by minute, stolen by the earth floor and the drafts that never fully stop. You curl tighter. You tuck your hands beneath your chest. You press your feet together. The shapes beside you shift and breathe. Family, neighbours, children piled close, each body a small heat source, each breath shared in the smoky air. The animals nearby give off their steady warmth, a low tide of life pushing back against the cold. But even that can't fully defeat the deep winter hours, because winter doesn't need to win completely, it only needs to wear you down. The wind rises outside. At first it's just louder, a longer sigh sliding over the roof. Then it becomes more aggressive, scraping along the thatch in restless bursts. The sound makes the hut feel thinner. You hear straw rubbing, whispering, as if the roof is being combed by invisible fingers. The house creaks, wood shifting slightly under pressure, and that creak is enough to make your eyes open wider. A strong wind always carries a question. Will the roof hold? You listen carefully. If the thatch loosens too much, rain or snow can creep in. Moisture is the silent killer. It turns the inside of the hut into a cold trap. It dampens blankets. It chills bedding. It steals warmth faster than any open door. A roof leak in winter isn't just annoying, it's dangerous. Someone else stirs too, waking the same way you did. A figure rises near the hearth, careful and slow, moving like they've done this 100 times. Maybe they bank the coals more tightly. Maybe they scratch ash aside to find the faint glow underneath. Maybe they add one tiny piece of wood, not enough to make the fire roar, but enough to keep it alive. That person doesn't do it for comfort. They do it to protect the morning, because morning is when you must move again. Morning is when chores restart. Morning is when animals need feeding and water needs fetching, and labour doesn't care whether you slept well. Morning requires function, and function requires warmth. Outside, the wind makes the trees groan. The sound is low and distant, like the forest itself complaining in its sleep. Somewhere far off something shifts. Maybe an animal, maybe a fence, maybe snow falling from a roof. It's impossible to know. That uncertainty is part of winter's power. Darkness hides the truth and leaves you with imagination. You swallow once, throat dry, and feel the smoke in your lungs. The air is thick again, shared too many times. But you still prefer it to the air outside. Outside is pure cold, pure blackness, pure exposure. Inside, at least, there is structure. There is ritual. There is the fragile order of a household holding together. The storm continues for a while. Then slowly it begins to ease. Not suddenly. Winter never gives anything quickly. It loosens its grip in tiny steps, as if testing whether it should tighten again. The wind drops from a howl to a whisper. The roof stops rattling so sharply. The hut settles into a calmer stillness, and that stillness is when you feel it. Time moving, the hours shifting. You don't know exactly when, because you have no clock, no glowing numbers beside your bed, but you sense it the way animals sense it, the way tired bodies sense the moment a night begins to lift. The darkness becomes slightly less absolute. Not bright, not warm, but different. A faint thinning at the edges, like someone has loosened a black cloth over the world. Somewhere outside, far away, you hear a sound that isn't wind. A bird. Just one. A small call cutting through the cold like a needle through cloth, and you realise the impossible thing is happening. Morning is coming. Your eyes close again for a moment, not from sleep, but from relief. Real relief. The kind that spreads through your chest like warm broth. Because surviving winter night isn't about waking refreshed. It's about waking at all. It's about opening your eyes and realising your fingers can still move, your legs can still carry you, your breath still fills your lungs. You stretch slowly beneath the blanket, joints stiff, muscles sore, body heavy. You don't feel comfortable. You feel lived in. You feel like you've spent the night defending your own warmth with nothing but wool and shared breath and a fire that barely survived. The hut is dim, but the light is changing. It seeps in through tiny gaps, through cracks, through whatever opening your home allows. Pale winter light, weak, grey, almost sad, yet still powerful, because it means the night has ended. Someone near the hearth scrapes ash aside and finds the coals glowing faintly, hidden like a secret. A soft breath is blown into them, and the embers brighten. Another stick is added. The fire wakes slowly, reluctant but alive. The room gains a thin new warmth, and you sit up, not eager, not cheerful, but ready. Because that's the peasant skill, the true survival skill that doesn't get sung about. You rise even when you're exhausted. You move even when your body aches. You keep going because the season demands it. As the day begins, you look around at the people beside you. Faces tired, eyes heavy, hair smelling of smoke, clothes wrinkled and stiff, but alive. The animals shift, living heaters that made the night easier. The roof held, the fire lived, the household remained intact, and in winter, that is enough. That is victory. Not a grand victory with celebration and music, but the quiet victory of endurance. The kind that happens every day, unseen by history books, carried by people who never expected comfort from the world. So if you ever imagine medieval peasants as simple figures in the background of castle stories, remember this night. Remember the smoke, the straw, the cold, the careful fire, the shared warmth, the way morning had to be earned. because they didn't survive winter with romance. They survived it with discipline, with community, with stubborn, ordinary courage. And when the pale light of dawn finally fills the hut, you understand the final truth of a medieval cold night. You don't defeat the winter, you outlast it. One long, bitter night at a time.